Welcome into Rover Sports, and this is a very cool podcast, and I am joined by my good buddy John Nabors. I finally got to meet you down in Atlanta last week, and John, what is this week like? Getting back from Atlanta, getting back to life up there in Northwest Arkansas. What's been the come down from SEC Media Days?
Well, it's just been something that we've been able to really take advantage of and having for good show content, mainly. Just taking anything that we had from the guys that the coaches, players, whoever it was, and being able to run with it. I came back with a little bit of sickness. I think I had too much fun in Atlanta. So I've been having to try to recover from that. But, that's what happens when you try to balance doing an early morning radio show while also going out and having a night on the town every single night. So you just kind of got to find a good balance there. But I'm not as young as I used to be. But it was a good time, man.
It's a rough life, but you got to turn back the clock,
That's right. That's right, man. That's right.
And the true pros, I guess, like you probably saw a lot of other radio guys. And do they try to act like they didn't just have a big night out on the town? They try to disguise it?
I think probably the other radio guys are a little more professional than me. So they probably actually did do a night in instead of going out and enjoying themselves. But, I'm sure you saw though on Radio Row, there's not many people out there that are younger than me out there on all the radio rows. It's usually older guys or married guys or whatnot, but not many people who are single and in their 20s were out there. So, but it worked out perfectly though.
Exactly. And John, just about SEC Media Days, you got to interview a lot of guys like Peter Burns. I'm surprised he knew about Fortnite. I'm really surprised that he picked right up on that question. And he's the type of guy that I think that he's just – Barrett Sallee and Peter Burns are two guys that just – they just act like they own the place, They're pretty unfazable cats, don't you think, Barrett and Peter?
Oh, yeah, they're good friends of mine. I mean, we've talked a lot, and I went on when Peter filled in for Paul Feinbaum a few weeks ago, I actually went on as a guest on Feinbaum, which was really cool. So me and Peter and Barrett, like those guys, we've had a friendship for a long time. I've known Barrett for a long time. And me and Peter, we actually play Fortnite together a lot of times too, just because it was like something that, we both were enjoying and, we kind of were on the same level. And there's probably not many people who are in the SEC media that really play Fortnite or at least talk about Fortnite. So, but yeah, we had that friendship from that as well.
You got to try to stay connected to these kids, right?
Whatever way it takes, man. I'm still a kid at heart, that's for sure.
No, and that's great. And we're talking with John Nabors, and you can find his show, Morning Rush Podcast. And is it 99.1 FM in Arkansas?
It's actually, we're on 13 different radio stations throughout the entire state. So, I mean, our main station's 95.3 in Arkansas and in the River Valley area. You can also do 99.5 Northwest Arkansas, Hot Springs area. Southeast Arkansas is 96.3, 104.3. Probably if you can just drive throughout the state, search for a frequency, and we're probably on it.
So, John, I wanted to ask you, I mean, I know that this topic might be sensitive because, Bret is no longer with you guys, but the first couple of years at Arkansas, you had that famous game against Texas Tech where literally Texas Tech couldn't even get the ball back. You guys went to Lubbock, and you just ran it right down their throat. And it was probably one of the more enjoyable experiences for you as an Arkansas fan. And Bret would get all these offensive linemen in there, and they'd always put up on the CBS ticker how your offensive line was bigger than some NFL offensive lines. Why did the drop-off occur with the offensive line?
Well, because size doesn't mean you can play offensive line. I mean, you've probably seen guys in basketball that have been 7'6", but does that mean they can play the game of basketball well? Not always. I mean, it gives them a little bit of advantage in height, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be good players. It's the same way at the offensive line. I think that losing Sam Pittman at the offensive line coach position was detrimental, and you could have probably made up some ground, but I think the hiring of Kurt Anderson to replace him might have been the worst coaching hire I've ever seen. From a head coach in the University of Arkansas football history. Did not know what he was doing, completely out of his element, did not know how to recruit. It was just a mess there. And so you just saw the major drop-off when you go from having arguably the best offensive line coach in college football to having the worst offensive line coach in college football. That's how quickly you can drop just that suddenly for Arkansas.
And Rob Smith defensively, do you look at Rob Smith and do you think he was unorganized defensively?
I think that he not necessarily just him. I think that they, as a group, were unorganized. It started off strong, and I think Beilema tried to do something similar to what a Frank Broyles type of style was. where he's basically just being a manager of great assistant coaches. He's not an offensive guru. He's not a defensive guru. He's not going to butt in. He just wants to hire really good assistant coaches and have them do their jobs, which can work out a lot of ways. The problem is that his organizational skills were not great. You could tell it on the field. The conditioning program was not good. They constantly collapsed in the fourth quarter. They didn't have a lot of leadership. It was just people kept looking to someone on the team to try to find out, okay, who's going to lead us, who's going to, bring us out of this. And usually it's the head coach in a lot of cases, but Bielema wasn't built that way. I think that he mailed it in towards the end. I think that he pretty much gave up on the team and on the season. I think it was evident, especially in his last year, where they were barely winning any games at all. I mean, Coastal Carolina was 1-7, and you play him in Fayetteville, and you only beat him by 1 point. I mean, I've said this many times, I believe Bret Beilema put back the Razorback football program and was more of an embarrassment to the Razorback football program than what John L. Smith did in that 1 year in 2012.
Because of just the recruiting and letting everything kind of slide.
Well, it was that, and then it was this constant, here's one thing. It's one thing if you can come in, you give it a shot, you do all you can to recruit, and you lose. Hey, sometimes coaching hires don't work out. But it's quite another thing if you're like Bielema was, to come in, talk trash to everybody, start telling everybody that the way they run their offense is bad for football and it's not safe. When your style, you can't even be successful at it. You keep telling the media and telling the fans that, our defensive line is going to be great this year. It's the deepest I've ever had, and it's terrible. You just continue to just put your foot in your mouth on things, and that makes you downfall a lot quicker than what any other coach would if they just stayed out of the limelight. But that's just not how he was built. I think he came into the SEC thinking that he could just cakewalk the whole conference like he did at Wisconsin in the Big Ten, but he found out rapidly that you can't do that. And so instead of just trying to adjust to it and trying to work harder at it, he just says, well, this is not for me, so I'm just not even going to worry about it.
With Bret Beilema in the SEC, he basically probably ran at Wisconsin. He would run he would run the I, and he would run the power I, he'd run the power I with Brandon Allen and back, with that sort of offense. Do you think that once the SEC, once they started to shut that down, he then lost his identity completely? Like when he brought in Enos and he just tried to make it like an aerial raid. Do you think he had an identity crisis? And do you think there was no plan B with Bret Bielema? Why do you think he started to quit or have complete doubt in his style of running the football?
Well, I think part of it is just he had his identity in his mind, but he didn't know how to translate it onto the field. He knew what he wanted to do, but he didn't know how to translate it. At Wisconsin, he had a lot of great players. He had a lot of good guys that came in and they had a lot lesser competition. So he was able to work out. And it was also a foundation that was laid and built down by Barry Alvarez that he took over. So it's almost like he inherited a great, healthy program at Wisconsin to where I'm not going to take anything away from him because he won those games and won those championships, conference championships. But he did not have as much of an uphill battle than he did at Arkansas, where he's having to take over a team that was not built on the foundation, that had no help. He didn't have any help from an AD or a former coach. It was all on him. And for the first time, I think he was just overwhelmed. I don't think he knew what to do in any case. So, but the identity crisis, I think, was a problem because that's one other reason why people were really wondering what in the world he's doing when he talks about he wants to run the football, big, meaty offensive lineman, but then 2 years, 3 years in, you're completely a different offense. What it sounded like to everybody else is that that's what he wanted to do, but he didn't know how to do it, so he had to change it up. He had to do something different because he was just in over his head on that at that point.
We're talking here with John Nabors. John's so kind to join us here on Rover Sports. He's a part of the Morning Rush there in Arkansas, a really fun 4-team radio show in the mornings there in Fayetteville. And just download the podcast on iTunes, The Morning Rush. And John, now let's switch gears to talking about Chad Morris. With Chad Morris, he had a year in Stevensville High School where he was 4-8. There were for sale signs in his lawn back when he was coaching high school ball in Texas. And then he said that Gus Malzahn basically saved his coaching life. Did Chad Morris talk to you guys about that story? And have you asked Chad what Coach Malzahn taught him that radically changed his coaching life and made him continue to coach football?
As far as that story went specifically, no. I personally haven't talked to him about that story. I've heard about that story too. But what it was more than anything is that him and Malzahn are very similar in what they believe and how they want to do it. Philosophy, culture, style, everything. They're pretty much on the same level. The only difference is that Gus Malzahn's been a head coach longer. Both had a very similar coaching path when it came to Chad Morris in Texas, Gus Malzahn in Arkansas. They got their chance as an offensive coordinator at a smaller school, did well there. Then they go to a bigger school, become the offensive coordinator there, do really well. Then they get a head coaching job at a smaller school. Gus Malzahn was at Arkansas State, Chad Morris at SMU, and then now here they are. So I think that more than anything, it was just a matter of I don't know if it's just something that Gus Malzahn just taught him specifically and then it changed everything. But what I do believe is that both of them are wired the same way. And so when Gus was a little ahead of Chad Morris and what he was able to do and how he was able to build up his coaching career, I'm sure that Chad just kind of came to him and saying, hey, what's the direction I go here? Which path am I going to – how do I do this? And then I'm sure Gus helped him out, and then, the rest was history. So I know that they have a good friendship, a working friendship, and one that I think can excite Razorback fans because they'd like to have some of the success that Malzahn's had. But can Chad Morris be better than Gus Malzahn is going to be the question.
I guess I could just speak to this from kind of a neutral perspective, but I always kind of root for Arkansas to do well and be successful. I think Chad Morris just absolutely kills it in the media sessions. I mean, I was so impressed how you guys were able to get that Our Coaches Clinic. He's very accessible to the fans. And Chad Morris, I really look at what Chad's doing, and I think that the expectation – he's basically proclaiming that Arkansas can get to a championship level. Like, he's putting high expectations on this program. Do you enjoy what Chad is doing with the media? Do you think Razorback fans are just really responding well to the messages in these press conferences?
I think so, for the most part. He's not doing anything controversial, and I think that's a breath of fresh air. Because, again, like I mentioned earlier, Bret Beilema came in and was just taking shots at everybody. And I think Razorback fans they may not be getting the great sound bites, something that really drives the conversation. But what they do get is they get a guy that's just he's personable, he's down to earth, and he's going to talk to you about what's going on, and he's going to be really happy and excited about it. He may give you a lot of coach speak, but that's fine. I think that people don't really care about what he says. In fact, he could come out and he could talk trash to people, and no one would care what he says. It's about what he does. And they, at this point, they just want to get the season started so they can actually start seeing what he's made of instead of just having to worry about what people like me say or what Chad Morris says or anything. Talking doesn't matter to these fans right now. They just want to see what he can do on the field.
I look at the SEC and I look at the coordinators, and I know that this is kind of projecting, but Joe Craddock, to me, he just seems like a superstar in the making. I mean, you've gotten a chance to be around Joe Craddock. I mean, the way that he's been, groomed by Clemson, by SMU, by Chad Morris, he seems like a guy that could possibly be a head coach someday. Are you worried about possibly losing him in a couple of years? And do you think that this guy is going to be just a home run offensive coordinator for the Razorbacks?
Well, I think Razorback fans are hoping they do lose him in a few years, because what that means is that they have a really good, successful offense. That's something that's part of coaching. You always have guys who are successful at schools going to end up and getting better jobs and as head coaches. I think that's just part of the way it is. But I think he is a superstar in the making. I think that he's a young, energetic, very smart, very brilliant guy that Chad Morris obviously trusts and has spoken very highly of. And, that's something I think Arkansas needs. They don't need old guys to run an offense like this. It needs to be excitable. It needs to be energetic. It needs to be fast. It needs to be fun. And I think having a younger staff, because I know on the defensive side of the ball with John Chavis and Steve Caldwell, those are old guys with a lot of SEC experience, which is fine for defense. But on offense, I think when I was looking at it, all the coaches that are on the staff, or at least coaching major positions, all graduated college fairly recently. Like, when I mean recently, I'm saying in the past 15, 20 years. So they're a younger staff. At heart too. So I think that'll be great for them. And Craddock is kind of he's the leader of them all. And I think that if he can get it going and if he leaves, that'll be great for Arkansas, because that means he's doing a good job.
It's kind of like the LA Rams with Shawnee McVay and Wade Phillips. You know, you kind of had the old guard on defense.
Yep.
You have all the young bucks on offense. And, John, I just wanted to ask you just a few more questions. I thank you so much for joining our program, John. You're always welcome on our show anytime. You do tremendous work.
Thanks.
I wanted to talk about how you're a Jets fan, like why you're not a Cowboys, why you're not Giants. Like, how'd you pick out the Jets, you know, as a team?
Well, when I was a kid, you usually go around with what you grow up with. And – it's as weird as it is. When I was a kid, my favorite color was green, for one, and that was a start. But also my dad was a huge Joe Namath fan. And he had a New York Jets helmet that he had as he was a kid when he was watching Joe Namath. And so when I was really into football, I saw a football helmet, and it was a Jets helmet. And so it all just kind of clicked. And then the first year I really started watching them and understanding it all was the year 1998. Where they went to the AFC title game against the Denver Broncos, who eventually won the Super Bowl that year. But they were a really good team and had a lot of great players. So it just kind of stuck from there. I've followed them and I've rooted for them. It's been tough at times. But, people give me crap for it, especially down here when they say, oh, I'm sorry to be – I was like, hey, you know what? Say what you want about the Jets, but they've played in 3 AFC title games since the Cowboys have, won 2 playoff games. So – I mean, if you talk about a Cowboys fan, yeah, you got the Super Bowls and all that, but you haven't been crap in 20 years. At least the Jets have done something in the past 20 years. So, but yeah.
Mark Sanchez has double the playoff wins Romo has.
Yeah, in fact, and all of his were on the road, and that's what was crazy about it all. I mean, it wasn't even like it was home games; it was all road games for Mark Sanchez. But,
right.
They had good seasons.
When they beat Phillip Rivers, that must have been one of your favorite games, or. The year before that was probably your favorite with LaDainian Tomlinson when they went to New England.
Oh yeah, that was awesome because New England, I think they were 14-2 that year. I mean, 13-3. They were just a loaded team, and yeah, we went into Foxborough and just ran all over them. They didn't have an answer. The defense shut them down. Rex Ryan was running down the sidelines to go and hug everybody. It was a great game. I wish we could have finished it out, but it was still had some great moments though.
Yeah, that was it. Big Ben, like when he played you guys, it was Peyton Manning the first time around, where you had a Braylon Edwards touchdown, and then, Peyton kind of got you guys. But the Steelers game, if you wouldn't have had such a horrible first half, that second half, I mean, you guys were a couple of stops away late in the game from really making that thing a photo finish.
Yeah, and we couldn't score on the goal line there late in the game against the Steelers too. So, yeah, there was a lot of issues there.
Do you like Rex Ryan better or Parcells better?
I mean, if you're talking about for entertainment purposes, I think Rex Ryan was definitely better. But as far as the coach itself, Parcells for sure. I mean, everywhere the guy went, he didn't always win Super Bowls every single time, but he definitely knew how to rebuild a team that was in trouble for a long time. And he was a great coach for the Jets too.
Are you watching Hard Knocks? You watching Last Chance U? You getting for the summer? What shows you watching to get for the summer?
Yeah, Hard Knocks. I don't care about as much. I used to watch it pretty religiously, but it just kind of got to the point where I don't know. It just lost I lost the interest in it, especially when it started having teams that I could care less about.
Right.
Like the Cleveland Browns. I guess Baker Mayfield being there is kind of cool, but I don't care about that. I have watched Last Chance U though. Finished it up 2 days ago. Fantastic stuff as always. This was a different season though, in a different place. From what it was previously. But, yeah, that's always a good, nice little getting amped up for the football season, especially that comes out. And it was really good once again, and I hope they keep doing it too.
Jason Brown, like, he wasn't that schematical, we could say, in terms of his X's and O's. But the guy is a colorful personality. I think he's kind of a villain, Jason Brown. What do you think?
Yeah, no, he's a villain. I think he's a guy that just can recruit really well, but doesn't know what to do with them. I mean, yeah, the unorganization, just yelling and cussing at people. Like there was no strategy. There was no culture. There was no philosophy. There was nothing. It was basically just he had been able to bring in the best talent, and that's why they won games. So
exactly.
I'm not a big fan of his, but because there's the thing too, Buddy Stevens in the first 2 seasons. Yeah, he was kind of a blowhard redneck, but you could tell that he knew what it took to win football games. He had an offense, he had a defense, he had strategy, he had organization. There was never really any issues where he couldn't get the play in. Now, one of his coaches maybe or assistants, but when this guy's calling the plays and he doesn't know what to call and he's missing stuff, it was just a mess. So, yeah, but he was. I wasn't a big fan of his at all. In fact, there wasn't really many players I was a big fan of too. I liked Rakeem Boyd because Rakeem Boyd's actually coming to Arkansas, the running back from last chance U. So at least that was fascinating.
Wow. Yeah. Malik Henry. Yeah. I don't even know where he's going, but I haven't finished it yet. I've gone for 2 episodes, but boy, Coach Brown, it's all about him. It's all about his enemies. That's what makes it pretty funny too. And Buddy would also have like Clint Trickett, and Clint Trickett might be a head coach someday. Bo Wallace was on the staff. So yeah, like the East Mississippi. Yeah, that's a big time, really big time program. But John, I want to thank you so much, man, for coming on the show tonight, for joining me. I really appreciate it, man, and thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, anytime, man. Appreciate it. Good luck to you.